Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hopefully, all is well and that you're having a good day with us today. We are super excited to get started with this wonderful conversation from these awesome humans and really talk about what's going on through grad admissions minds, right? And so, welcome, 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 and thank you for joining today's conversation. My name is Clifton Chambry. I am a life design educator here at Johns Hopkins University on the Homewood campus in our Life Design Lab. And I'm really excited to moderate this conversation with these wonderful folks that are going to share all their good tips and tricks. And so in a moment, I'll give a brief introduction of each of our panelists and then ask them a few questions. Then I'll leave some time or maybe jump at answering some of your questions through the discussion and posing those to our folks. But I encourage you to add your questions throughout the chat and the discussion piece throughout the conversation, because I will probably just pull some of your questions throughout the conversation. But we definitely will leave time at the end. So keep that in mind. Definitely would love your participation in this conversation. And so with that, I'll start with some introductions, and then I'll have our panelists talk a little bit more about themselves and their role as they answer one of the questions. All right. And so we'll start with Taryn. Taryn is the Director of Recruitment, Communications, and Events at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. Welcome, Taryn. We then have Dave Spaulding. He's the Associate Director of Admissions at the Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. Welcome, Dave. Great to have you. And then we have Derk, who is the Assistant Director of Admissions at Johns Hopkins Carey Business School. Welcome, Derk. And welcome to all of you all who are with us joining the conversation. We're super excited to have you all. And so we'll just get right on started. So I'm going to ask the first question, and I'll pose this to you, Derk. So I think this is a good question. I'm a student, and I'm looking to apply to a program. What should I know? How should I apply? Or what makes a strong application? Just jump right in, right?
Yeah, sure. So I think of just sort of the way, like maybe a way to approach that question is just thinking generally from like the prospective student sort of stage all the way through to the point of applying. And I think that, one of the things for us at Carey, and I think, generally amongst colleagues that I've had interactions with at other business schools, one of the things that we value greatly is prospective student engagement. And that starts everything from or begins at that stage of, getting to the website, being engaged, attending events or virtual events or in-person events, getting to know your respective admissions representative, scheduling, individual calls, whether it's 10, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, even though your program may not necessarily require or have a formal interview component to it. I still think having that one-on-one opportunity or one-on-one conversation, I think allows that admissions representative to sort of get to know you a little bit more, gain some additional context, especially surrounding some areas where maybe, there was a point in your academic history to where maybe you struggled a little bit. If there's an employment gap, if you have an interesting sort of, element to your application or to your resume that allows, I think, to provide some additional context and depth. And I think, the one thing too is a little bit of research. We'll get into that probably a little bit later throughout the conversation here, but, I think it's always refreshing for me to engage with somebody who has clearly done their research. They know a little bit more about the school. They feel that, their individual, values may dovetail well with what the school is doing. Maybe you're a little bit up on some of the interesting or exciting things that are happening at the school, more broadly, but maybe at a little bit of a different level, about interesting things, maybe within leadership or maybe lead faculty within the respective program to which you're pursuing admission to. Those are all things I think that, and I'm sure that maybe my colleagues, that are with me today may have some additional information to include, but those are some of the things that kind of jump out, at first, for me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that Derk said. I mean, I think when you're thinking about your application, regardless of what type of degree program you're applying to, a lot of the application is pretty cut and dry by the time you get to that point. Your transcripts are what they are. Your resume, it is what it is at that point, and that's all fine, and that's great. Think about the pieces that you can really customize. So whether it's one essay, two essays that are required of whatever program, if it's your personal statement, really talk to, like Derk's saying, talk to your admissions officer and see what that particular program is looking for. Is it sort of your personal story and background? Is it your does that program really want to see what your goals are and really being able to articulate that well? If it requires an analytical essay, what type of topic? I mean, make sure you're picking something that's relevant to what you're looking to study, where you're looking to go, and use those opportunities to really make yourself stand out. Talking about how you're a good fit for the program, but also where you see yourself going, I think are great ways to really make yourself a cut above just sort of the middle of the road applicant.
Yeah, and I'll just add on there too a little bit about, making sure that you are aware of all of the application requirements. And right now with the standardized test scores almost kind of going away, keep that in mind. If you're applying to a program that's very heavy in the quantitative area, there's going to probably be questions in the application that are going to ask you, how can you show us your quantitative ability now that the GRE scores aren't required? And so you want to make sure that you're answering that well, but also see if you can pull in other parts of your application that show your quantitative ability. And so again, I'm talking about programs that will require that. Not all of you might be interested in heavy quantitative programs, but it's something to think about. If you're still in undergrad and you have another year or two, think about the coursework that you're planning to take to make sure that it's going to meet the needs and help you, with your graduate school applications. And I would just kind of elaborate a little bit on the personal statement too. I don't know about, all the programs that you're thinking about, but there's a lot of our, most of our master's programs don't require an interview component. The doctoral, yes, but most of the masters do not. So your personal statement is your one shot. It's your one shot to tell your story, what sparked your interest, why you're pursuing that degree. And again, like Dave said, you want to make sure you're addressing any of the questions that specific program is looking to see. But again, it is for master's programs, generally your one shot to kind of show who you are and captivate the review committee.
That's super awesome. Thank you all so much for that. I think, reflecting on my experience and hearing those tips, I was like, oh, yes, that's okay, noted for the next time. So I'm also wondering, this is an area where I didn't do that much with when I applied to grad school. So I'm wondering more about what kind of relationships should students think about having with the institution or with the faculty, right, that they might be interested in working with. And I'll go with you, Taryn, first for that question.
Sure. Yeah. So really good question and really important. We get that a lot when we're recruiting is, should I reach out to faculty? Should I make those connections? And at the master's level, you generally don't necessarily need to make those connections, but you certainly want to make sure that there's faculty at the school that are doing research in the areas that you're interested in if you're looking to pursue research. That you just want to make sure that this not only, because you're not only proving through your application that you're a good fit for the school, but also that the school is a good fit for you. So you need to make sure that you're looking to see what the faculty are doing. Anyone that's interested in possibly pursuing a PhD or some other type of doctoral program, and yes, you definitely want to make sure that you are making those connections with faculty. And I think a huge piece of advice when you're reaching out to faculty, they're obviously busy. They're getting lots of these emails while trying to teach and also do their own research. I think Derk mentioned it earlier, is do your research before you reach out to them. Don't ask general questions. Can you tell me a little bit more about the program? They don't want to hear that question. They want you to say, okay, I've read this. If you have a specific question, that's what you want to do. And then also if there's a call to action, can we set up a 5-minute phone call? I just want to touch base with you. Or, it's something to be very specific so that they know you've done your homework, you've done your research, you're aware of the program, you know what you want to do, and ask those very specific questions. And I think that is also good advice for when you're just talking to, I think, admissions representatives as well. I don't know, I don't want to speak for Dave and Derk, but I think the worst question you can say is, tell me about your program. That is by far the worst thing you can do. It means you've done no research. We have websites, we have events like this. Do your homework, show that you're interested, show that you really are committed. So I think that's just really a really important part, especially, I'm talking really about from the public health field, is that it's such a broad field. So there's so many different avenues, so many different areas of public health that you can get into. So it's really important to make sure you do your research ahead of time before trying to make those connections with faculty.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything. I think the one piece I'll also add on, just in terms of relationship building, pay attention, and Derk touched on this earlier too, is some schools will offer interviews, some won't, some will be optional interviews. At the master's level, like Taryn said, you're not generally connecting with faculty, but there might be opportunities to connect, whether that's with a current student, with an alum, whoever that is. And I would take advantage of those opportunities, even if it's an optional interview. I mean, that's what we do for the majority of our MAIR program at SICE, is we have an optional interview, and they're run by our current second-year students. But it's still a traditional interview that you also then get an opportunity to connect with a student that's going through the program right now. You get to ask some questions of them and really sort of get a feel for the program, and making sure that it's also the right fit for you. So take advantage of those, a little bit of those opportunities as well. As a great way to really build a relationship and have someone else speak on behalf of you and your application and say, yeah, I met this person, I think they're a great fit. Another way to sort of do some self-promotion that way.
Yeah, so I'll just sort of, add on a little bit, like to Taryn's point, like, I think of an example of just this last fall at one of our prospective student events. Students were given the opportunity to attend, obviously, a live virtual session with a faculty member, and then whenever he asked, are there questions, and there was crickets. And I think that if somebody would have been really interested in the program, or that was interested in the program, had done some of the things like preliminary research on the program, maybe that individual faculty member or things that were happening, someone can really make a significant impact, on a faculty member that could, later result in a conversation directly with us. I think of, again, somebody who was admitted late in the program when slots were highly selective. I remember getting a phone call, or I should say, an email directly from the academic program director that said, I had a conversation with this student. It was phenomenal. She's great. I fully endorse her application. And then, that led to a lot of positive things for her. Yeah. So I think, and then, one other thing is, on this idea of relationships, I mean, communication is something that's happening. Do keep in mind, whether it's a second year, first year student, your admissions representative, be professional and be appropriate in those conversations. Especially with students. I know maybe kind of may seem very casual, like that's fine, but do keep in mind that, that often at times some of these students that are, may hold the title of ambassador or maybe functioning within that capacity, may let somebody within the admissions office know, like, hey, I don't really see that person fitting in the program or at the school, or they said a few things that are a cause for concern. So do keep that in mind as well.
Nuggets upon nuggets. Love it. I'm also interested in a few things. So I'll start with, as admission reps, when people are sharing their experiences or connections or relationships, what do you think about when that's mentioned, whether or not if it's in a personal statement or the interview process, whether or not if they already have established relationships with people at the institution, faculty, staff, et cetera, whatever that might be. What does that mean to you as you're either reviewing or recommending students for admission?
I mean, there's a myriad of reasons you're applying to grad school and applying to specific programs, whether that's a career change, enhancement. I mean, that goes across the board. But I think at any level, being able to demonstrate knowledge and interest of the program helps show you've done your research and you've taken the time.
Mm-hmm.
If in a personal statement, you can't speak to anything specific you're looking to do at SICE, it comes across as vague. It kind of tells me that you are applying, you just wrote the same essay to us and the 5 other competitor schools, didn't put a lot of time and effort into it. But if you can speak a little bit to whether it's a specific professor, a course, and not just, you know, a little bit deeper than just, I browsed the course catalog and pulled one out, like being able to show some real knowledge of the program. Yeah, it stands out to me in a way that says, you understand what we're sort of all about here and what we can help you do and where we can help you go. So I think that's definitely beneficial.
Yeah, I would agree. You know, and I think, you know, seeing or reading, like, we don't have personal statements, but in essays or even in conversations where that sort of, you know, evidence of prior research into the program makes sense. You know, being sort of or displaying some level of intention. You know, I did this in my undergrad, and that's what drew me to this program specifically. This, you know, ABC opportunity or that particular course I think will provide me with an opportunity to further expand my knowledge in whatever discipline that may be. So to David's point, I think those are really great pieces of advice.
Yeah, and I also think too, I think Clifton, you were asking, you know, part of the question was about like mentioning certain people that you've had connections with. And I think that is something that is mandatory, but I think it is important, you know, to establish connections, like any type of internship position you have, research assistantship position, anything that you do, a volunteer position. If you have made connections in the past with people at different institutions that you could potentially be going to for graduate school, keep those connections. And it is definitely something that you could, you know, I don't think you want to go around, you know, name dropping, but I think you definitely want to say, you know, I've worked with this person and they made an impression on me, and they've made a you know, lasting impression that has really, you know, sparked my interest in this field and pushed me to move forward with pursuing a degree in this area. So I think if when you're going to mention somebody that you've had a connection with or that you know, put context around it as to why it's helped you make this decision to apply to that school and to that program. I think that's really really vital if you're going to be mentioning different names of people within that institution.
I like that, because what I'm hearing from you all is like you have to make the experience meaningful to who you are as a human, as a person, but also to the institution and you all as admissions folks, right? You have to know that it's going to be a meaningful experience for all parties, including the school. Is that kind of what you're saying, and then kind of summarizing it all together?
Yeah.
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 Cool. I'm also, you know, when you think about mission, vision, or values, right? Because that's kind of what you all are talking a lot about. Is it important for a student to focus on the program and the faculty in that program and the school, or maybe the program more so because it's a part of the school? Because I think some people could be confused about which one to focus on. And I think, David, you started talking about this a little bit earlier as well. So I'm wondering, you know, how do I balance both or all aspects, even like being involved, like getting involved in the school outside of the classroom or as part of a co-curricular experience? So I know there's a lot there, but I'm just trying to help people think more about like how do I balance all what goes into possibly being involved in this experience?
Yeah, so there's a lot to pack in there, and I think a lot of it starts with, even within each of our individual graduate schools, there's a lot of different type of degree programs and experiences. So your application, I think, is going to need to be tailored to that a little bit. I mean, we all have sort of our, you know, flagship 2-year full-time traditional graduate experience, and when you're talking about that, yeah, I mean, that's the most robust experience that you're going to get from any of us. So when you're applying to that, really talking about sort of full circle, here's what I've done, here's where I see myself, here's where I get there. If you're applying to a program that allows part-time or an online program that's geared a little bit more towards a working professional, talking about some of those experiences and how you're looking to integrate this into your life and take that next step, whether it's with your current job or with you're using this to make a pivot. And I think that that experience of whether you're pivoting or whether you're enhancing is also important in the application too. I mean, I think within lots of graduate schools, SAIS in particular, using our degrees to pivot your career is quite common. While there are people that are already working sort of in that space and making a move, but framing your application that way and being able to articulate those goals and say, yeah, here's what I've done for the past couple of years. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Like a negative experience can also be a positive. And then I did this, and that's what led me to want to get involved with the World Bank or the IMF. And I see SAIS being able to help take me there. So being able to really take us on that journey is what's important. And I think it's also important, especially for this audience, being aware of sort of when the right time is to apply to graduate school, because there's going to be programs like here at SAIS. I'll just use SAIS as an example. On average, people come into our program with 2 to 4 years of work experience. That's not a hard requirement. We do have students that come into our program right out of undergrad, right out of Hopkins. But you're going to need to tailor your degree in a much different way than someone that does have that work experience. So it's really being able to speak to those co-curricular experiences, the internship experiences. What have you done to sort of bridge that gap between yourself and someone that does have 4, 5, 6 or more years of work experience? That just being able to demonstrate that we know coming out of Hopkins, you've got the academic ability, that's not a concern, but what's that other value that you're still bringing to the classroom in your graduate program that it's going to keep you on par with that same person, with that person that does have that work experience level. And, I always tell people, apply when the time is right for you, and that could be right out of undergrad, but just know that there are a lot of other factors that go into that. And some of that, if financial aid is important to you, well, if the school is a merit-based aid program, like many graduate schools are, work experience is a piece of that. And that's something you might want to consider, whether it's worth getting a year or two experience before you apply or applying right out. So, I'll pass it over to my colleagues. But that's just, sort of a number of things that sort of all play into that all at once.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in here too and say I guess I'm coming from it again from public health, because you do want to make sure. I think the mission is extremely important to figure out if it's the right fit for you, especially for those of you that might be interested in the doctoral program where you're going to be spending good 4, 5, 6 years, maybe not necessarily on the campus, especially once you're done the coursework part, but you're still in that institution. So taking a look at what offered outside of the classroom is extremely important. Even if you're only going to be there for 1 or 2 years, taking coursework, what extra things are going on at the school that you can get involved with? We have a great program called Source that connects students to different volunteer organizations in the community. It works with the School of Nursing, School of Medicine. So it gets students outside of the classroom actually practicing what they've been learning, getting their hands dirty and working with the community, and really trying to build those relationships. And also, again, public health is a very passion-driven field. So in your application, being able to convey that passion for the field. And I would say, I don't want to speak for nursing, but I would say same with nursing too. Same with in that regards, is that you want to convey why you're so interested in that particular field, and show your passion, whether it's through your statement of purpose, through your CV or resume. Your recommendation providers are also extremely important. And I'm going to kind of go on a little bit of a tangent with that too, because we haven't really touched on recommendation providers. I think sometimes people think that those are kind of just skimmed quickly, and not paid attention to too much. And I will say that recommendation providers can sometimes make or break an application. So you do want to make sure that you are picking those that can really speak to your ability to not only do the academic work, but to do things on your own, to be a leader, to be able to do independent research. So whether you're going to be applying several years out of undergrad, or applying right from undergrad, it's important to make those connections now with faculty and maintain those relationships. Because you're not sure exactly when you're going to apply, you need to make sure you have those relationships with faculty, because it is important to have at least one faculty member be able to write a letter of recommendation for you once you start the graduate school process.
Just to add to the conversation, I think, the mission and values, I think it is important to certainly pay attention to that, because I think you're going to see that exhibited, throughout your experience or opportunities or things that you may encounter. Everything from maybe perhaps the way an individual faculty member may approach, how they present the material, to various student organizations, affinity groups, extracurricular activities, or co-curricular or experiential learning. So, if there's something there that you really, vehemently disagree with or don't, align with, you're going to continue to see that. So you have to sort of, be aware of that. I think, and I would say as far as the letters of recommendation, really important, so do keep that in mind, especially like how you're sourcing, sourcing those. So, but just my 2 cents, I suppose.
I think tying into that too, be aware of maybe any prerequisites that any specific program has. Doesn't mean that you necessarily have to have them at the time you apply, but if you don't, probably addressing that in your application and showing that self-awareness is good. Many programs, if they do, you can be admitted conditionally or some form of that and complete it before enrollment. But just being aware of everything that you need, and that sort of shows your preparedness, self-awareness, you've done your research, all of that is also key as well.
That's good. I like it. I'm wondering about, someone put in the chat, and I think it ties into this a little bit because you mentioned it a couple of times, about folks' engagement and through their application process, right? And so are you tracking what that engagement is for candidates? And so, because that's what it seems like it might be, or maybe it isn't. I don't know. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about what that engagement or maybe that tracking looks like.
Are you asking if applicants are reaching out to admissions reps, to faculty while they're applying? Is that what you're?
Yeah, I think it's a combo of both. So everything leading up to the pre-admission process.
I could say I know I can only speak for public health. We're not really tracking the engagement. I think the departments may, especially at the doctoral level, I know the faculty, all of our applications are reviewed by faculty review committees. So it's really the faculty that are actually reading the application. So they may be tracking that, but I don't think it's something that you want to do to try to, I don't think it's something that really is tracked that much, at least at public health, but I think it will help you, I think, as the applicant, to make sure it's the right fit for you. Connecting with current students is huge, because even if you get admitted, right, it's not necessarily that's going to be your choice. You still have to make that decision. Okay, I've been admitted to a few different programs. Now, which one am I going to attend? So I think it's honestly more beneficial for you to just, if that's going to help you be kind of reassured that, all right, this is a good fit for me. This is where I want to be. I can see myself here, and start that process early, connecting with the school, participating in as many events as possible. I know all of our events will have current students involved, and some faculty at some of the events. So you can make those connections there, and then it can kind of snowball, and you'll be able to connect with more and more people as you go through the process.
Say for Carey, we don't really, attending an event doesn't necessarily go into any sort of scoring function or how we review, applications. I can't speak for everybody that's in my similar position at other schools that I've talked with. I mean, frankly, I've never really brought it up within a professional conversation. I don't think it's something that really happens a lot, say within business schools. I do think that, again, showing up to events, I think does help, to reinforce the fact that it'll allow you to gather, more, meaningful information. I think the one thing though too is like if you make an appointment or if you register for an event, show up, or if you don't, or if you can't understand there's conflicts, cancel it. Like I feel like I don't want to say that it goes into a scoring function, but it just isn't really that good to schedule an appointment and not keep it. I feel like generally that's just, hopefully you're doing that throughout your life generally, but especially when it comes to one-on-one appointments, there have been very frustrating times like where I've sat and waited and nothing, like a no call, no show, I suppose, if you will, if you want to say that. But I do think that, it is important to if you cannot make it or if there is a conflict, to let somebody know. But outside of that, it's not really like, attending, next month there's 10 events. If I attend 10 events, it's going to somehow raise your stock. I don't think most people are going to be doing that, or most institutions or schools will be, that person came 10 times. Like they've got these poor traits or qualities to their application, but they attended every event.
Thank you. It brought me back to, it's not like Facebook where you can just say you're going and just don't show up. Please let people know by saying you're not attending. I like that. I'm also wondering, before we get to the questions, I think, we've seen in our world today that there is an increased interest in really thinking about justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so I'm wondering more about what that looks like in your process when you are looking at applicants. Are you looking at how they value justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion, or are you looking at candidates that bring different perspectives? What do you think about when you are looking at applicants, and even thinking about your candidate pool, period?
Yeah, here at SAIS, being a school of advanced international studies, that's obviously both international and domestic, very valuable to us. We're roughly 45% international in terms of our student body. So you can expect to find a very diverse pool here with us. In terms of US, obviously, when you're talking about a group of students that are looking to typically go into jobs that are influencing policy and things like that, that's a big inclusion, and diversity is a big piece of that for us, because and demonstrating that in a way that we want diverse voices making those decisions down the line. You want to be part of that decision-making process to make it a more equitable world down the line. So in terms of strictly here at SAIS, it's something that is pushed very hard, and something we very much value and promote as a big benefit of our school, is the diversity that you're going to experience and the different worldviews and viewpoints that we're bringing into the classroom. And that's not unique to us, but it's just something that it's a big part of what we are in this type of program, if you're thinking about a graduate IR degree.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that is that we at Public Health, holistic admissions is very big at our school, and I will say we do a lot of events with other public health schools, and same there too. Holistic admissions, taking all parts of your application into consideration. And if we want to call it, there is, sometimes there can be silver linings of a pandemic. And I will say one of those was when we started, allowing applicants to submit applications without test scores. And we did it last year because of the pandemic. And now programs, actually majority of our programs have also kind of said going forward, we no longer need them. We've been able to evaluate applications without those standardized test scores, and we're liking the diversity of our applicants this year, and they're excited about it. They're excited to see that people are accepting the offer. And so I think that too, just right there, eliminating standardized test scores is huge at a lot of graduate schools right now. Really, it kind of forces faculty and other reviewers to really hone in on the different parts of your application. Okay, what can this student, their academics weren't fantastic, but look at their personal statement. Look what they can bring from their personal experiences, from their life experiences. Look what they can bring to the table. So yeah, I know we've held holistic workshops at our school to kind of help faculty learn what holistic admissions is. And also we have an office that was formed, so a year and a half ago now, an Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Anti-Racism. And we have our first dean of that office. So I think schools or graduate schools in general understand the value And you should hopefully see that, but I think it is something that you want to look into, especially if it's important to you. Look into see what schools are doing in that area. I will say that area has grown so much. There's different certificates that you can get involved in with social equity and justice at different schools. So not only is it kind of the outside of that classroom, but there's degree programs, certificate programs that you can get involved in at different schools to tackle those issues as well.
Sorry about that, guys. I kind of cut out there at one point. Just to kind of, piggyback what has already been shared. I mean, I think that just about everybody, every institution here within Hopkins, I think, and you kind of see some of the messaging from leadership, I think, has a really strong commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. You look at Carey. I mean, we have a summit. The institution itself has the diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging summit. We're trying to incorporate elements of that into many of our business courses. Because individuals are coming out of Carey are going to be leading companies. We want them to be able to be adequately equipped to to function and perform as business leaders, and part of that is addressing matters related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So you see that within the classes that we have, and many of the co-curricular and some of our experiential learning activities as well too. So again, I think this almost kind of ties a little bit into just obviously mission and values. Look at those things, and if it is important to you, take a little bit of a deeper dive, and don't be afraid to necessarily have the conversation or to ask that question. One thing, looking at a faculty, I mean, I think you're seeing a lot of institutions have individuals within, or have created an office, or have somebody that is the lead contact for a lot of the schools or the universities' respective initiatives in that regard. That's somebody too that you can reach out to. And again, look for specific events that are there, and even look for prior events. I mean, I think now with the advent of moving to sort of this virtual platform over the last year, a lot of these events have been recorded. And I think, institutions are trying to leverage those recordings as ways to kind of get the messaging out there. So, again, part of that research, dig a little bit deeper. And, again, if you can't find it, you can always reach out to that missions representative and just say, hey, I've been looking specifically for this. I was on the website. I wasn't able to quite find it. Can you help me find it? Can you connect me with that person? So it's a great way to start a conversation and again, engage.
Awesome sauce. You all rock. Thank you so much for sharing some of your thoughts on those questions. I am going to transition because we have some real good activity in the discussion. I'm so excited about it. And so I'm going to ask a few of these questions, and I'm going to try to combine some of them, but answer the questions thereafter, parts or all. And so I'll ask one of these questions first. Is it less likely or impossible to get accepted to grad school at the same university you did undergrad?
I mean, at least for us, absolutely not. I mean, for all of you all in the room, we have a direct admission program for Johns Hopkins undergrads and graduates, and I think you'll see common threads through that with other graduate institutions. So for everyone in this room, absolutely not. We encourage and welcome it, and we see your as completing Hopkins undergrad as an extreme benefit to your program. That's why we've simplified the process for you.
Yeah, just same with public health. We have, a bachelor's, master's program, and now we're some of our departments are opening it up to people outside of the public health studies program. So making it available to more and more majors at JHU and not just public health studies. So absolutely, it's not a negative by any means.
Same with Carey, not a negative. And I actually think that the director of admissions, Kelly, actually may have worked with you, David, or some other folks at SICE, and we're a little maybe late to the game, but we developed a direct admission program, last spring for Hopkins undergrad students. We've tried various things like, unique opportunities for financial aid. So we love, Hopkins undergrads for a variety of reasons. But yeah, come talk to us. We'd love to see applications from you guys.
And similar to that, we all have dual degree options together too. I mean, SAIS has dual degree options with both Carey and Bloomberg. So if you're thinking that there are multiple graduate institutions within Hopkins you're interested in, you may be able to combine those. And generally, a dual degree means you're shaving a semester off each program, and that saves you a little bit of time, significant amount of money. So look into all those sorts of options too if you're looking to combine various interests.
Talking about building your own journey. I love it. That's what it's all about. And continuing to be a Blue Jay in your academics, not just an alum. So that sounds like an awesome opportunity. I'm wondering about, during this COVID time, grades are different. So I'm wondering, someone was asking the question, I'm going to read it. For this term, because grades are allowed to be taken as SU, would it be better to show a B, which would bring their GPA down, or should they do or just show the SU? Would PhD admissions act to uncover those grades?
I mean, I'm happy to jump in. I think that we are all admissions offices are very aware that over the past year and a half, grades look a little bit different. And many times that was out of your hands. The school made a decision. And I think Hopkins, if I'm not mistaken, Hopkins said, especially last spring, all grades are just pass fail. And we understand that as long as you pass, we recognize that, we know things were different. When it comes to having the option at this point, I mean, you're talking about applying to top tier competitive graduate schools. My personal opinion would be to show your grades at this point if you have the option to. Getting a B isn't a bad thing. I mean, when we see a B on there and be like, oh, I just don't know if they can hack it now. I think I would be a little more concerned if you have the option that you would say, oh, I'm just hiding these and I passed. And there may be courses, depending on the type of program you're applying to, that we need to see a grade for. And unless it was, during times when it wasn't an option for you, yeah, we're going to need to see that you did get that B or higher in microeconomics, those sort of things. So given the option, that's the way I'd lean. But, there may be differences of opinions and reasons to go one way or the other.
I would agree. Throughout this process, we've been trying to be as sensitive as we possibly can to issues related to grading. But I would say to David's point, I think there does come a time when making that decision to show your grades, I think, is something you're going to have to give serious consideration to. Again, when it thinks about like engaging with the admissions officers, you can talk to them a little bit about that. Other ways to sort of help contextualize unique aspects of your application. For us, we have an area in our essays where a lot of students who experienced grading issues related to the pandemic were able to provide some additional information or clarifying information within that portion of the application. And generally, we found that that was extremely positive, both the conversations and the written statements. So something to consider as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And I think I have two more questions. It's not a combo question, but the first question is, from one of the folks in the chat, if you tried to guess what was going on in the admission officer's mind when you applied for grad school, how did you go about guessing? And in retrospect, did it help you in preparation? And so you could think about that question. And in preparation for like applying to grad school, I'm assuming that's what this person is asking for. But also the second question, there are a lot of questions here. I'm wondering if there are ways that folks can follow up with you all if they want to target a question directly to you to follow up to get more questions answered. And if there is, if you could put that in discussion while others respond to the first question, so that we don't get kicked out at 2:50 and we can get everyone to respond.
Is there a way we can just write it to general? Okay, do we start a new discussion? Is that
yes.
what you want us to do? Okay,
yes.
Yeah, we can put that in there.
So the question to respond to on video is, if you tried to guess what was going on in the admissions officer's mind when you applied for grad school, how did you go about guessing and or figuring it out?
I mean, I think my advice on that is, when you're going through these, don't, like Taryn said, the holistic review is a real thing. It's not just a buzzword. We're really looking at reading, taking in every piece of the application that you submit to us. Don't feel like you need to check off boxes for us. We're not done. When we say holistic, we're not dumping your application into some matrix and just it's telling us who to admit. We're really reading everything. So really take the time to tell us your story, tell us who you are and what makes you a good fit. So to that end, don't worry about what we're thinking. We want to know who you are and what makes you a strong applicant for our programs. And if you can do that and demonstrate that, make your application unique, speak to your individual goals and focus, and really make it about you and not just another generic application. That's how you're going to help make yourself stand out and make us say, wow, that was an interesting essay. I enjoyed reading that. If you can do that, you're on the right track.
So I guess I'm not sure if this is going to really answer the question, but I think the one question we get a lot is kind of how do I stand apart from other applicants? What makes me a standout? And I will say, and this is a little bit more from just public health's perspective, but we do not have any cookie cutter students at all with public health. So a lot of times people come to us and they're like, well, what courses should I be taking? What should I be doing in my free time? What kind of volunteer experience should I have? What kind of work experience? And it's really impossible to answer that question from public health, because a lot of times people almost fall into public health, their life experiences, their personal experiences, their things that their family or friends have gone through in the past, has kind of really pushed them into the field of public health. So bringing those experiences to the table and showing them through your resume, CV, your personal statement is extremely important. So I will say that's one way that you can stand out, and getting any kind of experience you can, as far as it doesn't have to always be paid professional work experience, but volunteer experiences, internships are huge. And I think, Dave, you were saying this earlier, that it doesn't always have to be these positive, wonderful things where, oh, it was a great experience, a great job, I loved it, that's why I want to go here. You can mention, I did this, wasn't for me, but I learned this, and this is why I want to go this route now. So any kind of experiences you have can not only enhance your application, but also help solidify the area the route, kind of the road you want to go down, and the right program that's going to be the best fit for you.
Yeah, I think everything that was mentioned is great advice, and I think if I had anything else to add, it might just be the idea of articulating, or having the ability to articulate why you're pursuing the program that you are, and and I think maybe being able to do that in a way that signifies, or at least gives some level of indication that you've thoroughly thought out like what you've done, and where you want to go, I think is great. And then how that program kind of fits into that sort of process, I think is great.
Awesome sauce. And I think for me, the last statement I would make is just that you're not alone in this process. And so really think about that as a way of helping you through this journey, right? And so knowing that you have all these wonderful people. You have now 3 great people who can help you answer any questions that you have, right? And if you are applying to other places, you have other folks at those institutions that you can also connect with, right? People who are reading these applications are people, and they care about people getting into the space and having this experience. And so think about that as you go through this process. You also have us as the Life Design office to really have these conversations. So we're here to help you think about who to go to, who to ask. You have your faculty folks. Work with people to make your strongest representation of yourself. So that is my little tip. for you all. And so we've reached the end of the session. Thank you all for joining us today. Huge thank you to our panelists, and thank everyone for being a part of this conversation, participating in the discussion. Super awesome to have joined us. Definitely think about continuing to have these conversations with folks, but also throughout the rest of this particular grad camp. So you'll have some more sessions today and some sessions tomorrow with more great riveting information. Also, you'll find some folks probably tweeting some information or putting information on LinkedIn. So definitely check that out so that you can learn more about what's happening. And so thank you all for joining us, and hopefully you all have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.